Writing at Wills Point Middle School is a very important part of our curriculum. We believe it's really important for you to learn to put your ideas out of your brain into words and that you are able to write those so that people who read what you write will understand what you were thinking inside of your head. So, we have a special strategy that we use called seam writing. And the purpose of seam writing is to encourage you and help you to write effectively to communicate those ideas. And the way that we are going to help you do that is to provide opportunities for you to practice because we believe the more you practice, the better you get. So you're going to have opportunities to practice writing in all of your classes in fifth and sixth grade. The process that you will be using to learn to do your best writing has a name, and that name is called SEAM. You will hear your teachers talk about the SEAM writing strategy. SEAM is an acronym. An acronym is a word where each letter of the word stands for something. And in SEAM, the first S stands for statement, and that is where you will state the answer to your question. E stands for evidence, and that's where you will let your reader find out why you chose the answer you chose. The second E is explain, and that is where you will explain how the evidence you chose to support your answer helps to communicate to your reader why that answer is correct. And the M stands for moral. Another way to think of the M would be what do I want my reader to remember about my answer, or what lesson do I want my reader to have learned when they have read my whole answer. Now, SEAM can be used anytime that you answer a question. It can be a question where it's not a multiple choice. There's no A, B, C, D answers. There's no true, false answers. There's no checkbox answers. This is where you have to actually go inside your head and determine what the correct answer is and put that into words. So that also sometimes is called a short answer, and it's sometimes given to you in the form of a writing prompt. So we're going to take two examples and practice the SEAM strategy together. The first example that we're using is to choose your favorite state and explain the reasons that that's the state you chose. So this is 4 steps. The first step, state my answer. Texas is my favorite state. Step 2 is what evidence do I have to support why Texas is my favorite state? My answer is in Texas, you can visit the coast, mountains, deserts, plains, and forest. In step 3, I'm going to take each of the evidence pieces and explain how those help my reader understand why I would choose Texas as my favorite state. The Gulf Coast provides opportunities to enjoy sand and sun. Big Bend has mountains with great views. You will find desert landscapes across West Texas. North Central Texas is home to plains and prairies that provide agricultural resources, while a trip to East Texas will put you in the middle of the piney woods. And once I have stated my answer, given my evidence, and explained how my evidence supports my answer, I am ready to sum up my answer by letting my reader know what I want them to believe and why I chose the answer. To see this variety of landscapes, you would expect to travel to many states. However, the great state of Texas has it all. So, beginning with a question and working through those 4 steps, I am able to put together thoughts out of my brain into words so that someone else can read my words and understand why I answered the way I did. And this is what the answer to that question sounds like. Texas is my favorite state. In Texas, you can visit the coast, mountains, deserts, plains, and forests. The Gulf Coast provides opportunities to enjoy sand and sun. Big Bend has mountains with great views. You will find desert landscapes across West Texas. North Central Texas is home to plains and prairies that provide agricultural resources, while a trip to East Texas will put you in the middle of piney woods. To see this variety of landscapes, you would expect to travel to many states. However, the great state of Texas has it all. SEAM is a great way to take a question that can seem really big and difficult and break it down into those 4 small pieces so that you can actually take all of your thoughts and put them into a clear and easy to read format. Now, this was a good example that you could see in a reading class or a social studies class, perhaps. But I want to show you how the SEAM writing strategy also works in a math class. It can work in any class for any question, but we're going to look at a math example. If you're in 5th grade math, you may have seen this example last week. This question appeared: explain the things you need to remember when subtracting across zeros. That's the question. Your teacher did give you some clues. She went on to say, what do you do when it is 0 minus 6? And then finally, she wanted you to know that your answer should be 3 to 5 sentences. Now, this mathematical problem, is simply an example. It is not the question. The question is to explain the things you need to remember. If this were our question, we could just answer it and put the number in. But what we're being required to do here is to explain our thinking. This would be what we would call an open-ended or short answer question. And we can answer that because we have the tool called the SEAM strategy that will help us put our thoughts from our head onto paper or into a Google document. Step 1, we're going to answer that question. Again, the questions explain the things you need to remember when subtracting across zeros. My answer is, when subtracting across zeros, you must remember to borrow and regroup. Now, that is true. But my teacher said explain, and she said use 3 to 5 sentences. So I know that's not enough of an answer, and I have a great strategy to use called SEAM. So my next step, once I've answered it, is to use evidence. So here's my evidence. It is impossible to subtract a larger number from a smaller number. And that's true. That's my evidence. But now I want to explain my evidence to someone who may not understand it. So step 3, even though 300 is greater than 146, you must always begin subtraction in the ones column. In the ones column, you cannot subtract 6 from 0, so you must borrow from the tens column. In this case, there is a 0 in the tens column, so you must borrow from the hundreds column. Once you borrow from the 3, it becomes a 2. And you can change the tens column to a 10. Now or then you can borrow from the 10 in the tens column, and it becomes a 9, and you can change the 0 in the ones column to a 10. So I have answered the question, I've given evidence why I answered the question, and I have explained why my evidence is valid. So I'm ready for step 4, which is the moral of my answer, but we might think of it as, what do I want my reader to learn from all of that I've just explained? And my answer is, at this point, you can easily subtract each column to get an accurate answer. So now I have gone through 4 steps of the SEAM process, which has allowed me to construct an answer to the question with valid conclusions. When subtracting across zeros, you must remember to borrow and regroup. It is impossible to subtract a larger number from a smaller number. Even though 300 is greater than 146, you must always begin subtraction in the ones column. In the ones column, you cannot subtract 6 from 0, so you must borrow from the tens column. In this case, there is a 0 in the tens column, so you must borrow from the hundreds column. Once you borrow from the 3, it becomes a 2, and you can change the tens column to 10. Then you can borrow from the 10 in the tens column, and it becomes a 9, and you can change the 0 in the ones column to a 10. At this point, you can easily subtract each column to get an accurate answer. Using SEAM, stating, evidence, evaluating, and moral, I am able to provide a very clear answer for anyone who might read my information. I want to go back real quickly and just show you that seam process one more time, because I want you to understand that it's not about math, it's not about reading. Instead, it is about the process of stating an answer, putting forth valid evidence, explaining your evidence, and then summing up with the conclusion that you want the person who reads your answer to believe about your answer.